The manila envelope sat on Marcus Whitaker's kitchen table like a ticking bomb. The logo of Ancestry Genomics gleamed under the pendant light, almost mocking him with its cheerful blue helix design. Marcus ran his thumb over the sealed edge, his coffee going cold beside him. 63 years old, and here he was, afraid of a piece of paper. "Just open the damn thing," he muttered to himself, the empty house swallowing his words. When his daughter Claire had given him the DNA test kit for Christmas, it had seemed harmless enough. "You're always talking about your mother's Italian roots," she'd said. "Maybe you'll find some distant cousins in Naples." He'd spat into the tube, mailed it off, and promptly forgotten about it until this morning when the results arrived. With a deep breath, Marcus tore open the envelope. The papers inside were crisp, colorful, filled with pie charts and percentages. His eyes skimmed over them until they caught on a notification box at the bottom of the page. DNA match. Parental, 99.8% probability. The room tilted. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, his heart hammering against his ribs. Below the notification was a name he'd never seen before. Elijah Pearson. A son. A son he never knew existed. Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification, a message through the Ancestry platform. "I think you might be my father. My mother's name was Vivian Pearson. Boston, 1981. I understand if you don't want contact. Just thought you should know." The coffee mug slipped from Marcus's hand, shattering on the kitchen tile. Boston, 1981. Vivian. The name hit him like a physical blow, dragging him back 40 years to a different life, a different Marcus. He stumbled to the sink, splashing cold water on his face. In the window's reflection, he saw not the silver-haired school principal he'd become, but the young man he'd been, ambitious, reckless, running from his own pain. "Dad? You there?" Claire's voice echoed from the front door. "I brought those gardening supplies you asked for." Marcus quickly gathered the papers, stuffing them back into the envelope. How could he tell his daughter, his only child, or so he'd thought for decades, that her family had just expanded without warning, that the father she thought she knew had a past he'd never shared? "In the kitchen," he called, his voice steadier than he felt. "Just cleaning up a spill." As Claire's footsteps approached, Marcus slid the envelope under a stack of bills. The broken pieces of ceramic on the floor seemed to mirror the fragments of his carefully constructed life, suddenly scattered beyond recognition. Boston had been Marcus's escape plan. After his mother's death and his father's descent into alcoholism, the scholarship to Boston University had been his lifeline. The summer of 1981 found him interning at an investment firm, 22 years old, and determined to reinvent himself. Vivian Pearson had been the firm's receptionist, dark-haired, quick-witted, with a laugh that carried across the office. Their romance had been brief but intense, a summer fling that burned bright against the backdrop of a city where Marcus had no history, no baggage. "You're leaving at the end of August," Vivian had said one night as they lay tangled in her apartment's sheets. "Let's not pretend this is more than what it is." Marcus had agreed, relieved by her pragmatism. When summer ended, he'd returned to his final year of college, and they'd parted without promises. He'd written her once, a casual note that went unanswered. By Christmas, he'd stopped thinking about her. Now, sitting in his study after Claire had left, Marcus pulled out a dusty photo album. There, tucked between pictures of his college graduation, was a single photo of Vivian leaning against the railing of Boston Harbor, her hair blowing in the wind. He'd kept it all these years without knowing why. "She never told me," he whispered to the empty room. "She never gave me the chance to know." The anger came suddenly, hot and unexpected. Why had Vivian kept this from him? What right did she have to make that decision? And this Elijah? What did he want now, after all these years? Marcus found himself at his computer, fingers hovering over the keyboard. He could ignore the message, pretend he'd never seen it. His life with Beth, his wife of 35 years until cancer took her 3 years ago, had been full and good. They'd raised Claire together, built a home, a reputation, a legacy in their small Connecticut town. Would acknowledging this ghost from the past dishonor that life somehow? Before he could decide, his phone rang. It was Claire. "Dad, you seemed off earlier. Everything okay?" Marcus closed his eyes, seeing his daughter's face, Beth's eyes, his mother's smile, the perfect blend of his chosen family. "Just tired," he lied. "Been thinking about your mom a lot lately." "The anniversary's coming up," Claire said softly. 3 years next month. I've been thinking about her too." After they hung up, Marcus returned to the computer. His finger hovered over the mouse, then clicked reply. "Vivian never told me about you. I would have wanted to know. I'm still processing this, but I'm willing to talk." He hit send before he could change his mind, then sat back, heart pounding. 40 years of not knowing. A lifetime for Elijah. What could possibly bridge that gap? The reply came the next morning. Marcus had barely slept, his dreams filled with faceless young men who turned away when he approached them. He opened the message with trembling hands. "Thank you for responding. I only found out about you recently myself. My mother passed away last year, and while going through her things, I found letters she'd written to you but never sent. I'm not looking to disrupt your life. Maybe we could start with a phone call?" Elijah had included his number. Marcus stared at it, those 10 digits representing a connection to a person who shared his DNA but was a complete stranger. He paced his living room, rehearsing what he might say, then discarding the words as inadequate. Finally, he dialed. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was deep, cautious. "Elijah? This is Marcus Whitaker." A pause. "I wasn't sure you'd call." "I wasn't sure either," Marcus admitted. "This is all very sudden." "For me too. I grew up thinking my father died before I was born. That's what Mom told me." The words landed like a punch. "She told you I was dead?" "She had her reasons, I think. Mom wasn't. She struggled with a lot of things." They talked for an hour. Elijah was 40, a software engineer in Seattle, divorced with no children. His voice had a careful quality, as if he were measuring each word. He asked questions about Marcus's life, listened intently to the answers, but revealed little about himself beyond the basics. "I have a daughter," Marcus said finally. "Claire. She's 32. She doesn't know about you yet." "I understand," Elijah said. "This affects more than just us." When they hung up, Marcus felt hollowed out, as if something essential had been scooped from inside him. He wandered through his house, touching familiar objects, the quilt Beth had made, Claire's childhood drawings framed in the hallway, the collection of river stones from family camping trips. His life had weight, substance. Yet suddenly there was this other branch, growing parallel, unseen until now. That night, Marcus dreamed of Boston. In the dream, he was young again, standing outside Vivian's apartment building in the rain. He knew, with the certainty that comes in dreams, that his child was inside, a baby, waiting for him. But no matter how many times he pressed the buzzer, no one answered. He woke gasping, sheets twisted around him, the ghost of Vivian's laugh echoing in his ears. "Dad, what's going on with you?" Claire asked a week later. They were having their regular Sunday dinner, and Marcus had been distracted, dropping his fork twice and losing the thread of conversation. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just work stress." The lie tasted bitter. Marcus had exchanged several more messages with Elijah, learning bits and pieces about the life his son had lived. Good schools despite Vivian's limited means, a scholarship to MIT, a passion for mountain climbing. Each new detail was both a gift and a reminder of all Marcus had missed. Claire studied him across the table, her eyes, so like Beth's, narrowing slightly. "You're a terrible liar. Always have been. Mom used to say you'd be the world's worst poker player." The mention of Beth made Marcus's chest tighten. What would she have thought of all this? Would she have encouraged him to embrace this unexpected connection, or would she have seen it as a threat to the family they'd built? "There's something I need to tell you," Marcus said finally. "It's complicated, and I'm still figuring it out myself." He told her everything: the summer with Vivian, the DNA test results, the contact with Elijah. Claire listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to confusion to something Marcus couldn't quite read. "So I have a half-brother," she said when he finished. "A 40-year-old half-brother I never knew existed." "Yes." "And you never knew about him either?" "No, I swear. Vivian never told me she was pregnant. She never gave me the chance to be in his life." Claire was quiet for a long moment. "Have you considered that maybe she had good reasons for that?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you were young, about to finish college. Maybe she thought you weren't ready, or maybe she just didn't want to share her child with someone who was essentially a summer fling." "That wasn't her decision to make," Marcus said, heat rising in his voice. "He was my son too." "Is your son," Claire corrected gently. "He still is, and now you have a chance to know him, if that's what you both want." After dinner, as Claire was leaving, she hugged Marcus tightly. "Whatever happens with Elijah, I'm here. But Dad, be careful. This is 40 years of history you're stepping into. There might be things you don't know, things that could hurt." Her warning stayed with Marcus as he exchanged more messages with Elijah over the following weeks. They graduated from texts to video calls, the technology allowing Marcus to study the face of his son, the shape of his eyes, Vivian's, the set of his jaw, unmistakably Marcus's, the thoughtful way he considered questions before answering. During their third call, Elijah showed Marcus a photo of Vivian from her later years, still beautiful, but with a weariness around her eyes that hadn't been there in youth. "She worked hard," Elijah said. "2 jobs most of my childhood, made sure I had opportunities she never did." "She was always ambitious," Marcus said, remembering. "She wanted to go to college, become a journalist." Elijah's expression changed slightly. "She never got to do that. Raising me alone made that impossible." The guilt hit Marcus like a wave. "I would have helped, if I'd known." "Would you?" Elijah's voice was neutral, but his eyes held a challenge. "You were building your own life, new career, eventually a wife, a daughter. Would you really have wanted a child from a summer relationship complicating all that?" Marcus wanted to say yes, of course he would have stepped up, done the right thing. But the truth was, he didn't know. The Marcus of 1981 had been running from his own broken family, determined to succeed, to escape the limitations of his background. Would he have embraced unexpected fatherhood? Or would he have offered financial support from a distance, a check in the mail, rather than a presence in his son's life? "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I'd like to think I would have been there for you both, but I can't rewrite history." Elijah nodded, something like respect flickering in his expression. "No, we can't. But we're here now." "We are," Marcus agreed. "And I'd like to meet you, in person, if you're willing." There was a pause, long enough that Marcus thought the connection might have frozen. Then Elijah said, "I'm coming to the East Coast next month for a conference in New York. I could drive up to Connecticut afterward." The prospect of a face-to-face meeting was both thrilling and terrifying. "I'd like that," Marcus said. "Very much." After they disconnected, Marcus sat in his quiet house, thinking about the life he'd built and the one he'd unknowingly left behind in Boston. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine what might have been, a different path where he'd known about Elijah from the beginning, where perhaps he and Vivian had tried to make a life together, or at least co-parented across the distance. The possibilities were endless, branching like rivers from that single moment in 1981 when Vivian had discovered she was pregnant and decided to keep the news to herself. The email arrived 3 days before Elijah's planned visit. Marcus was at school, between meetings, when his phone chimed with the notification. "Marcus, there's something you should know before we meet. I've attached some of the letters my mother wrote to you but never sent. I think they'll help explain some things. Elijah." Marcus waited until he was home, door locked behind him, before opening the attachments. There were scans of 3 handwritten letters, the paper yellowed with age, Vivian's handwriting instantly recognizable, the looping G's, the way she crossed her T's with a flourish. The first was dated November 1981, 3 months after Marcus had returned to college. "Marcus, I'm pregnant. I've spent weeks debating whether to tell you, and I've decided against it. This isn't what either of us planned, but I'm keeping the baby. You're starting your career, and I remember what you told me about your own father, how his drinking destroyed your family after your mother died. You said you were never going to let yourself be trapped like he was. I won't be the one to trap you. I can do this on my own. Please don't contact me if you somehow find out. This is my decision, and I'm at peace with it. Vivian." Marcus felt sick. He remembered those late-night conversations with Vivian, the way he'd opened up about his family's dysfunction, his father's decline after his mother's cancer. Had he really said he feared being trapped? Had he given Vivian the impression he would see a child as a burden, an anchor weighing him down? The second letter was dated June 1982. "Marcus, Elijah James Pearson was born yesterday, 7 pounds 4 ounces. He has your eyes. I almost called you a dozen times during labor. The nurse kept asking about the father, and I finally told her you were dead. It seemed easier than explaining the truth. I saw your graduation announcement in the paper. Investment. Banking in New York. You're on your way to the life you wanted. I hope it makes you happy. Vivian." Tears blurred Marcus's vision. He'd missed his son's birth, his first steps, first words, every milestone. Because Vivian had decided for both of them. Because she'd believed he wouldn't want to be a father. The third letter was different, dated nearly 10 years later, in 1991. "Marcus, I saw your wedding announcement in the alumni newsletter. Elizabeth Harrington, from a good Connecticut family. You look happy in the photo. Successful. I'm glad for you. Elijah is 9 now. Brilliant, stubborn, curious about everything. He's starting to ask questions about his father. I've told him you died before he was born, a car accident. He seems to accept this, though sometimes he looks at me like he knows I'm not telling the whole truth. I used to be so certain I made the right choice, keeping him from you. Now I'm not so sure. But it's been too long. You have a new life, a wife who doesn't know about a child from your past. It would only cause pain to reveal the truth now. I won't send this letter, just like I didn't send the others. But writing to you helps somehow, makes me feel less like I'm carrying this secret alone. Vivian." Marcus set down his phone, his hands shaking. The justifications, the assumptions, the decisions made without his input, it all fueled a slow-burning anger. But beneath that was a deeper, more painful emotion, grief for the years lost, the relationship that never had a chance to form. He thought of Beth, who had wanted more children after Claire but couldn't conceive again. How would she have felt knowing Marcus had another child out in the world? Would she have welcomed Elijah into their family? He wanted to believe she would have, but the reality was, he'd never know. That night, Marcus called Claire. "I've been thinking about when you were little," he said, after they'd exchanged greetings. "Remember how I used to take you fishing at Lakers Pond?" "Of course," Claire laughed. "You were so patient untangling my line every 5 minutes. Mom used to say you had the patience of a saint." "I loved those days," Marcus said, his throat tight. "Just you and me and the quiet water." "Dad, what's this about? Is it Elijah?" "He's coming to visit this weekend, and I just keep thinking about all the moments I missed with him, teaching him to fish, helping with homework, being there when he needed me." Claire was quiet for a moment. You can't change the past, Dad. But you're reaching out now. That counts for something. Does it? Or is it too little, too late? I don't know, Claire admitted. But I think it's worth finding out. After they hung up, Marcus returned to Vivian's letters, reading them again and again, trying to understand the woman who had kept his son from him. Had she truly believed she was protecting Elijah? Or had there been pride involved, a determination to prove she could do it alone? And what about his own responsibility? He'd walked away from Boston without a backward glance, never following up when Vivian didn't respond to his one casual letter. He'd been so focused on his future, on escaping his past, that he hadn't considered what he might be leaving behind. The anger he'd felt earlier began to fade, replaced by a more complicated emotion. Maybe there was no villain in this story, just two young people making choices with the limited perspective youth afforded them, and the long shadow those choices had cast across decades. Elijah Pearson was taller than Marcus had expected. Standing on Marcus's front porch, he had to duck slightly to avoid hitting his head on the hanging plant Beth had loved so much that Marcus couldn't bear to remove it after her death. "You made it," Marcus said, his voice catching. Up close, the resemblance was unmistakable. The same slight cleft in the chin, the same way of standing with weight shifted to one leg. "Traffic was lighter than I expected," Elijah said, his tone carefully neutral. He carried a small duffel bag and wore a button-down shirt that looked newly pressed. He'd made an effort, Marcus realized. This mattered to him too. They stood awkwardly in the entryway until Marcus gestured toward the living room. "Please, come in. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be great, thanks." As Marcus went to the kitchen, he could feel Elijah taking in the house, the family photos on the walls, the comfortable but well-kept furniture, the evidence of a stable, middle-class life. When he returned with 2 glasses of water, Elijah was studying a photo of Marcus, Beth, and Claire at Claire's college graduation. "Your family," Elijah said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, that's Beth, my late wife, and Claire." Marcus set the glasses down on coasters. "Claire's looking forward to meeting you, if you're comfortable with that. She suggested dinner tomorrow." Elijah nodded, taking a seat on the couch. "I'd like that." He paused, then added, "Thank you for the letters, for sharing them." "I'm still processing them," Marcus admitted. "All these years, I never knew why Vivian didn't stay in touch. I just assumed she'd moved on." "She never really did," Elijah said quietly. "Move on, I mean. There were relationships over the years, but nothing lasted. She was protective of our life together, didn't want anyone disrupting it." Marcus absorbed this, wondering if Vivian's isolation had been a choice or a consequence of the path she'd chosen. "The letters mentioned you were asking questions about your father when you were 9. What did she tell you as you got older?" Elijah's expression tightened slightly. "The story evolved. By the time I was a teenager, she said you'd been a college student passing through, that she hadn't known how to reach you when she found out she was pregnant. By my 20s, she admitted she'd chosen not to tell you, but insisted it was because you'd made it clear you weren't interested in settling down." "That wasn't true," Marcus said, the words coming out more forcefully than he intended. "I never said anything like that." "Didn't you?" Elijah's gaze was direct now, challenging. "You never told her you were afraid of ending up like your father? Trapped in a life you didn't choose?" The echo of his own words from Vivian's letter hit Marcus like a physical blow. "I was 22 talking about my fears. I didn't mean I would abandon a child." "But you can understand why she might have interpreted it that way." Marcus wanted to argue, to defend his younger self, but the truth was, he could see how his words might have sounded to Vivian, especially if she was scared, facing an unplanned pregnancy alone. "Yes," he conceded. "I can understand that." They talked for hours, carefully navigating the decades of absence between them. Elijah shared stories of his childhood, the small apartment in Dorchester where he and Vivian had lived, The community college courses Vivian had taken at night while working days. The neighbors who had helped watch him when Vivian had to work overtime. She did her best, Elijah said. We didn't have much, but she made sure I had books, opportunities. She pushed me to excel in school, convinced me I could be anything I wanted. She sounds like she was a good mother, Marcus said, meaning it despite the complicated feelings swirling inside him. She was. Elijah hesitated, then added, but there were hard times too. Periods of depression when she could barely get out of bed. Financial struggles that kept her up at night. Times when I know having help, having a partner, would have made all the difference. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken accusation. Not that Marcus had been absent, they both knew that hadn't been his choice, but that his absence had left a void that had affected both Vivian and Elijah in profound ways. I would have helped, Marcus said again, the words feeling inadequate, if I'd known. I believe you, Elijah said after a moment, but belief doesn't change the past. As evening approached, Marcus showed Elijah to the guest room. The bathroom's just down the hall. Towels are in the cabinet under the sink. Elijah set his bag on the bed, looking around the room with its neutral decor and landscape paintings. This is very kind of you. I could have stayed at a hotel. I wouldn't hear of it, Marcus said. Not when we have so much time to make up for. Later, after a takeout dinner where the conversation had flowed more easily, Marcus found himself alone in the kitchen, washing dishes while Elijah took a phone call from work. Through the window, he could see the garden Beth had lovingly tended, now maintained by his own less skilled hands. The roses were blooming, their scent drifting in through the open window. What would Beth think of all this? The question had haunted him since Elijah's first message. Beth, with her strong sense of right and wrong, her belief in honesty above all else. She would have been shocked by the revelation, certainly. But after that initial shock, Marcus believed she would have encouraged him to embrace this unexpected connection, to try to build something meaningful from the ashes of past mistakes. You always said people deserve second chances, Marcus whispered, as if Beth might hear him from wherever she was now. I hope you're right. Dinner with Claire the following evening was both easier and harder than Marcus had anticipated. Easier because Claire, ever his diplomatic daughter, went out of her way to make Elijah feel welcome, asking thoughtful questions about his work and interests. Harder because seeing his two children together, the daughter he'd raised and the son he hadn't, made the reality of what he'd missed all the more stark. They were at Claire's apartment, a cozy space in West Hartford where she'd moved after her divorce 2 years earlier. She'd prepared a meal that showcased her culinary skills Marcus had always attributed to Beth's influence, but now wondered if they might have genetic components from his own mother, who had also loved to cook. So you climb mountains for fun? Claire was asking Elijah, genuine interest in her voice. I can barely make it up the stair climber at the gym without wanting to die. Elijah laughed, a sound Marcus was still getting used to. It's not for everyone, but there's something about standing at the summit, looking out over the world, that puts everything in perspective. Dad's afraid of heights, Claire said, shooting Marcus a teasing glance. Mom used to have to go up on the roof to clean the gutters because he'd get dizzy on the ladder. Really? Elijah looked at Marcus with surprise. I never would have guessed. One of my many failings, Marcus said lightly, though the comment hit deeper than he intended. What else would Elijah never have guessed about him? What essential parts of himself had never been passed down, never shared, because of the years of separation? As the evening progressed, Marcus watched his children, and yes, that's how he thought of them now, his children, find common ground despite their different upbringings. They discovered a shared love of science fiction novels, an identical inability to whistle, a similar dry sense of humor that had both of them laughing over inside jokes by the end of the meal. You have Mom's laugh, Elijah said to Claire at one point, then froze, looking uncertain. I'm sorry, it's okay, Claire said gently. "I'd like to hear about your mom sometime, if you're comfortable sharing." The moment passed, but it lingered in Marcus's mind, the acknowledgement that these two people shared more than just his DNA. They were bound together now, whether by choice or circumstance, part of each other's stories. After dinner, as they were helping Claire clean up, Elijah's phone rang. He checked it, his expression changing. "Excuse me, I need to take this. It's my ex-wife." When he stepped onto Claire's small balcony to take the call, Claire turned to Marcus. "He seems like a good person, Dad." "He does," Marcus agreed. "I keep seeing glimpses of, I don't know, myself? You? It's disorienting." Claire squeezed his arm. "It's a lot to process, for all of us." She hesitated, then added, "Have you thought about what happens after this visit? Are you going to stay in touch?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He'd been so focused on this immediate reconnection that he hadn't thought much about the future. "I hope so. I'd like to, but it's up to Elijah too. He has a life in Seattle, and I'm here." "People can have relationships across distances," Claire pointed out. "Look at us. I'm only 20 minutes away, and we make it work to see each other regularly. Seattle's further, but it's not the moon." When Elijah returned, there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked. "Fine. Just some logistics about the house we still co-own." Elijah's tone made it clear he didn't want to elaborate. The rest of the evening passed pleasantly enough, but Marcus sensed a shift in Elijah's mood, a pulling back, a reassertion of the careful boundaries that had characterized their early interactions. When they said goodbye to Claire, she hugged them both, including Elijah in the gesture, as naturally as if she'd known him all her life. On the drive back to Marcus's house, Elijah was quiet, looking out the window at the passing neighborhoods. "Claire's wonderful," he said finally. "You did a good job with her." "Thank you. Beth deserves most of the credit. But yes, she turned out pretty great." More silence. Then Elijah asked, "Was it hard, raising a child?" Marcus considered the question, wanting to be honest but sensitive to the implications. Yes and no. There were challenges, sleepless nights, worries. But the joy outweighed all of that. "Having Claire in my life has been the greatest privilege." Elijah nodded, still looking out the window. "I've thought about having children. My ex-wife and I tried for a while, but it never happened. Now I wonder if that was for the best." "Why would you say that?" Elijah turned to face him. "The call earlier. It wasn't just about the house. My ex told me she's pregnant. Getting remarried, starting the family we couldn't have together." "I'm sorry," Marcus said, understanding the complex emotions that must be stirring in Elijah. "That must be difficult news." "It made me think about patterns," Elijah said, "how they repeat across generations. My mother raised me alone. Your father became an alcoholic after losing your mother. What patterns am I carrying without even knowing it?" The question hit close to home. Marcus had spent much of his young adulthood afraid he'd inherit his father's weakness for alcohol, his tendency towards self-destruction when faced with loss. He'd been vigilant, perhaps overly so, monitoring his own behavior for signs of that same downward spiral. "We're not doomed to repeat our parents' mistakes," Marcus said carefully. "We can choose different paths." "Can we?" Elijah's voice was soft. "Or are we just fooling ourselves?" Back at the house, they sat on the back porch, the summer night warm around them. Fireflies blinked in the garden, and somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's wind chimes sang in the gentle breeze. "I have something for you," Elijah said suddenly. He went inside and returned with a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. "I was going to wait, but, well, here." Marcus unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a leather-bound photo album, smaller than a standard book. He opened it to find pictures of Elijah, as a baby, a toddler, a school-aged child with missing front teeth, a teenager with acne and attitude, a college graduate in cap and gown. Vivian kept these organized chronologically, Elijah explained. She was meticulous about documenting everything. I thought you might want to see what you missed. Marcus's hands trembled as he turned the pages, taking in the life that had unfolded without him. Elijah on a tricycle, Elijah holding a science fair ribbon, Elijah in a high school play, dressed as a king complete with crown and scepter. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice breaking. I don't have words." "There's something else," Elijah said. He reached over and turned to the last page. There, in a plastic sleeve, was a letter in Vivian's handwriting, dated just weeks before her death. "Elijah," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you found the letters to your father. I know you'll have questions, anger perhaps. I want you to know that keeping you from Marcus was a decision I made out of fear, not malice. Fear that he wouldn't want the responsibility, fear that I would lose control of our life together, fear of being rejected. I was young and scared, and I made the best choice I could with what I knew then. If I had it to do over, I might choose differently. If you decide to find him, to tell him the truth, I understand. And I hope he can forgive me for the years I took from both of you. All my love, always, Mom." Marcus read the words twice, then closed the album gently. She never sent the letters, but she kept them. All those years. "She kept everything," Elijah said. "Every school report, every drawing I made. She documented my whole life as if she knew someday you might want to see it." The realization settled over Marcus like a weight. Vivian had made a choice that had altered the course of 3 lives, but she hadn't made it lightly. She'd carried the consequences, and perhaps the regret, until the end of her life. "I wish I could talk to her," Marcus said. "Just once more, to understand better. To tell her I would have been there if I'd known." "I wish that too," Elijah admitted. "For both of us." They sat in silence as the night deepened around them, 2 men connected by blood, but separated by decades of absence, trying to build a bridge across an impossible gap. The morning of Elijah's departure dawned clear and bright. Marcus had slept poorly, his dreams a jumble of images. Vivian as he'd known her, young and vibrant. Beth in her final days, pale but still radiant. Claire as a child, running ahead of him on a beach. And Elijah, always at a distance, unreachable. He found Elijah in the kitchen, already dressed and packed, making coffee. "I hope you don't mind," Elijah said, gesturing to the coffee maker. "I'm an early riser." "Not at all. I'm glad you made yourself at home." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Marcus had opened the DNA test results that had set this all in motion. So much had changed in such a short time, yet so much remained unresolved. "My flight's at 2, Elijah said. "I should probably leave for the airport around 11. Marcus nodded, fighting the urge to ask him to stay longer, to delay the inevitable separation. "What happens now?" he asked instead. "After you go back to Seattle?" Elijah considered the question, his hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me wants to go back to my life and pretend none of this happened. It would be easier, in some ways." The words stung, but Marcus understood them. "And the other part?" "The other part knows that's impossible. You're my father. That's a reality I can't unknow, even if I wanted to." Elijah met Marcus's gaze directly. "Which I don't. Want to, I mean." Relief washed through Marcus. "I'd like to be part of your life, Elijah, in whatever way makes sense for both of us." "I'd like that too," Elijah said, "but I think we need to be realistic. We're not going to suddenly have a typical father-son relationship. Too much time has passed. Too much life has been lived separately." "I know," Marcus said, though the acknowledgement hurt. "But we can build something new, something that honors the past without being limited by it." They spent the remaining hours before Elijah's departure talking about practical matters, how often they might visit, the possibility of Marcus coming to Seattle, plans to include Claire in their evolving relationship. The conversation was easier than it had been at the beginning, the sharp edges of revelation beginning to soften into something more manageable. As Marcus helped Elijah load his bag into the rental car, a question that had been nagging at him finally surfaced. "Why did you decide to contact me? After you found the letters, you could have just let it be. Why reach out?" Elijah leaned against the car, considering. "I almost didn't," he admitted. "But after Mom died, I started thinking a lot about legacy, about what we leave behind and what we take with us. I realized I didn't want to carry the weight of her secret anymore. And," he hesitated, "I wanted to know where I came from, who I came from. And now that you know?" A small smile touched Elijah's lips. "I'm still figuring that out, but I'm glad I made the choice Mom couldn't make, to reach across the divide." They embraced awkwardly, then with more certainty, a father and son saying goodbye with the promise of future hellos. As Elijah's car disappeared down the street, Marcus stood in his driveway, feeling both loss and possibility. Back inside, the house felt emptier than it had before Elijah's visit, the silence more pronounced. Marcus went to his study and opened the photo album Elijah had given him, tracing the progression of his son's life through the carefully preserved images. So many moments missed, so many milestones unseen. Yet here, in his hands, was evidence of a life well lived. Elijah had grown into a thoughtful, accomplished man, despite, or perhaps because of, the circumstances of his upbringing. Vivian had done that, had shaped their son with love and determination, even as she carried the burden of her decision. Marcus found himself thinking of Beth again, of the life they'd built together. Would things have been different if he'd known about Elijah from the beginning? Almost certainly. But different didn't necessarily mean better or worse, just another path, another set of choices and consequences. He picked up his phone and dialed Claire's number. "Hey, Dad, did Elijah get off okay?" "Just left for the airport," Marcus said. "I was wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner tonight. I could use the company." "Of course, I'll bring dessert." Claire paused, then added, "How are you feeling about everything?" Marcus looked down at the photo album, at the life that had unfolded parallel to his own. "Grateful," he said finally. "Sad for what was lost, but grateful for what's been found." After hanging up, Marcus returned to the album, turning to the last page with Vivian's letter. Below it, in the final sleeve, was a photo he hadn't noticed before. Vivian and Elijah together at what appeared to be his college graduation. Vivian looked older, of course, her dark hair streaked with gray, but her smile was the same, proud and fierce as she stood beside their son. Marcus touched the image gently. "I forgive you," he whispered to Vivian's smiling face. "I hope you can forgive me too." 5 years later, Marcus stood in the arrivals area of Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. At 68, he moved a bit slower these days, but his mind remained sharp, his heart full. "Grandpa!" The shout came from a small figure who broke away from the crowd, running toward him with arms outstretched. Marcus knelt down, embracing his 4-year-old granddaughter, Vivian. Vivi, as everyone called her. "There's my girl," he said, lifting her up despite the protest from his knees. "You've grown 3 feet since Christmas. See." Elijah appeared behind her, smiling. "Dad, don't encourage her exaggerations. She's already convinced she's going to be 7 feet tall." "I'm going to be taller than Daddy," Vivi declared, wrapping her arms around Marcus's neck. "Of course you are, sweetheart," Marcus agreed, winking at Elijah. They made their way to baggage claim, Vivi chattering about preschool and her new best friend and the caterpillars she'd found in the garden. Elijah's wife, Sophia, a pediatric nurse he'd met 2 years after reconnecting with Marcus, texted that she was circling the pickup area in their car. "Claire's flight gets in tomorrow morning," Elijah said as they waited for Marcus's bag. "She said her boyfriend might join her later in the week, if he can get the time off." "Good," Marcus said. "I'm looking forward to meeting him. She seems happy." "She does," Elijah agreed. "It's about time, after that disaster of a first marriage." The easy way they discussed Claire, the genuine concern in Elijah's voice, never failed to warm Marcus's heart. Over the years, his children had built their own relationship, independent of him but made possible by his presence in both their lives. They weren't just siblings on paper anymore. They were family in all the ways that mattered. As they loaded Marcus's luggage into Sophia's waiting car, he thought about the journey that had brought them here, the shock of discovery, the pain of confronting the past, the slow, careful building of trust and connection. None of it had been easy, but all of it had been worth it. Later that evening, after Vivi had been put to bed with 2 stories and 3 goodnight kisses, one from each adult, Marcus sat on the deck of Elijah and Sophia's home, looking out over Puget Sound. The water glittered in the moonlight, and the distant lights of the city created a twinkling backdrop. Sophia brought out glasses of wine, handing one to Marcus before joining Elijah on the love seat. "Vivi's already planning your whole visit," she told Marcus. "The zoo, the aquarium, the children's museum, and apparently a trip to the moon." "Ambitious," Marcus laughed. "But I'm game for everything except the moon. My space travel days are behind me." They talked easily, the conversation flowing between topics. Claire's new job teaching art at a community college, Sophia's recent promotion, the addition to the house they were planning. Marcus listened, occasionally contributing, but mostly just absorbing the moment, the simple joy of being included in his son's life. "Oh, I almost forgot," Elijah said suddenly. He went inside and returned with a small box. "This came for you, forwarded from your address. Claire must have sent it here when she knew you'd be visiting." Marcus opened the box curiously. Inside was a USB drive and a note in Claire's handwriting. "Found this while digitizing Mom's old home movies. Thought you should have it. Love you, C." "May I?" Elijah gestured to his laptop, which was sitting on a side table. When Marcus nodded, Elijah inserted the drive and opened the single video file it contained. The footage was grainy, date-stamped July 1990. Beth appeared on screen, younger than Marcus remembered her ever being, holding a squirming toddler Claire. "Say hi to Daddy," Beth's voice urged from behind the camera. Claire, no more than 2, waved her chubby hand, then buried her face in Beth's shoulder. The camera panned to show their old backyard, a birthday party in progress. Then Beth was speaking directly to the camera, her face filling the frame. "Marcus, if you're watching this, you've probably forgotten to charge the video camera again. I'm leaving this for you to find later. I just wanted to say..." She glanced around, making sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "I'm pregnant. I took the test this morning. I haven't figured out how to tell you yet, but we're having another baby." Marcus's breath caught. He remembered this period. Beth had indeed been pregnant in the summer of 1990, but had miscarried in the fall. They'd grieved, tried again, but it had never happened. Claire had remained their only child. On screen, Beth was still talking, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I know how much you've wanted this, how we both have. I can't wait to see you as a father of 2. You're so wonderful with Claire. Our children are so lucky to have you." The video ended abruptly, cutting to static. Marcus sat frozen, the wine glass forgotten in his hand. "Dad?" Elijah's voice was gentle. "Are you okay?" Marcus looked up to find both Elijah and Sophia watching him with concern. "Yes," he said, his voice rough. "Just memories." Later, after Sophia had gone to bed, Marcus and Elijah sat alone on the deck, the night having grown cooler around them. "She never got to have that second baby," Marcus said quietly. "Beth. She miscarried a few months after that video was taken." Elijah nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'm sorry. All those years I thought we were a family of 3, but we were always meant to be 4. Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him, the man he'd become, the father he was to Vivi, the friend he'd become to Claire. We just didn't know where our 4th was. Elijah reached across the space between them, placing his hand on Marcus's arm. I'm here now. You are, Marcus agreed. And somehow, I think Beth knows. I think she's been helping guide us all along. They sat in companionable silence, father and son, the stars wheeling overhead, the sound of the water below, and the sense, impossible but undeniable, that they were exactly where they were meant to be. In the morning, Vivi would wake them too early, demanding pancakes and adventures. Claire would arrive, bringing her artist's eye and her infectious laugh. The family Marcus had never expected to have, in its complete and complicated form, would gather under one roof. But for now, in this quiet moment, Marcus simply sat with his son, grateful for second chances, for DNA tests, and courage and forgiveness. For the memory that had never really been just a memory, but a living, breathing part of his present and his future. We should go in, Elijah said eventually. It's getting cold. In a minute, Marcus replied, looking up at the vast, star-filled sky. I just want to remember this moment. And so they stayed, 2 figures silhouetted against the night, bound by blood and choice, and the long, winding path that had finally led them home.